The year 476 AD marked the end of the Western Roman Empire, with the final capture of Rome and the deposition of its last emperor, a young boy called Romulus Augustulus by the Germanic king Odoacer. By that time, Rome had been a highly monetized society for the last 700 years. This is an awful lot of time to mint vast numbers of coins, and we're left with the question: what happened to all of these coins after the fall of the Roman Empire? Did they keep circulating? For how long? Let's go on a small journey through time, looking at archaeological and numismatic evidence, and try to figure out what on earth happened to Roman money after Rome. Let's get started. Okay, once more before we start, we need to get a basic overview of the overall state of the empire at that time, as well as the kinds of coins they were using. What we call the fall of Rome wasn't this cataclysmic event, one massive invasion, a complete collapse, everyone running around panicking as the barbarians stormed the gates. No. First of all, we need to remember that only the western half of the empire fell. The eastern empire just kept going for 1,000 years. We call them the Byzantines nowadays, but if we look at coins like this fall is from the 10th century, so a long time after the fall of the western half, on the reverse, the emperor calls himself Basileus Romaion, king of the Romans, and this eastern half will strongly influence the initial evolution of coinage for these new kingdoms that took the place of Rome on Western Europe. Starting on the later half of the 4th century AD, we start seeing Rome lose control of its northern frontiers, with a series of tribes and peoples migrating into Roman territory and slowly carving their own kingdoms. Rather than this image of barbarians coming in and wrecking everything, what archaeological evidence shows is that these newcomers adopted a series of aspects of the Roman way of life into their own. One of them was the use and issuing of their own coins. Late Roman coinage consisted broadly of the solidus and its fractions, important gold coins used for big payments and as savings, tiny bronze pieces used on everyday transactions, mostly on urban contexts, and some less common silver coins, such as the siliqua. So for this initial period, from the 5th century until roughly the 8th century, old Roman coins kept circulating alongside local issues that were basically copies made by these new kingdoms. In fact, let's take a look at some examples. Here we have a solidus of Emperor Leo I, struck between 457 and 474. Old Roman solidi from the western half of the empire, and fresh solidi like this one struck at Constantinople. Remember, the eastern half of the empire was still around. Just kept circulating and were some of the most respectable coins of the time. Now let me put on the screen an example of an imitation of a solidus, struck just a few years later by that king Odoacer. These two coins would have circulated side by side, official quote-unquote and copy, in early medieval markets. But what about the abundant bronze coins that were left by the Romans? Here we have an example of such tiny little things. This is a tiny little numus, I promise you. There's the face of an emperor here. These kinds of coins had a fairly low purchasing power, obviously, look at the thing, and were really only meant for small transactions, mostly in cities. The countryside mostly devolved into barter. With the emptying of cities in the early Middle Ages, we can assume the demand for such coins plummeted and many just fell into disuse, but at least for the few urban centers in Europe that retained a considerable population and still had demand for coinage in its markets, these just kept circulating. We can make that argument based on the existence of plenty of small fractional bronze coins issued by these new Germanic kingdoms. Here on your screen now is an example of a coin struck at Rome at around 530 AD. As you can see, it is remarkably similar to the numus I just showed you, which was made a good 80 years before this coin. The only difference now is that we have new designs, clearly referencing these new Germanic kings. In this case, Athalaricus Rex, King Athalaric, and the small Roman numeral 5, showing this was a multiple coin, or 5 numi. We also find cases of even older Roman coins being found by people and put back into circulation. Check out this very worn sestertius of Emperor Vespasian. That's from the 1st century AD. Plenty of coins such as these are found in the territories of the old Vandal kingdom in North Africa. So we're talking about a 1st century coin circulating in the 5th, 6th century AD. As you can see, there's a number 83 in Roman numerals that was marked on its surface, like it was literally chiseled on top of the coin. So it was retariffing this coin to an 83 Numi coin, so it could just circulate with the new monetary standard. We also have evidence coming from burials indicating the presence of old Roman coins in circulation. The tomb of Childeric, a Frankish king that lived in the 5th century AD, contains a series of silver and gold coins which seem to have been carefully selected to be placed on his tomb, from Republican silver denarii dating to the 1st century BC to coins of the early and late empires. This selection of coins seems to indicate Roman coins were not only deposited here as money for the afterlife, but also as tokens of sovereignty meant to connect this Frankish king to the old emperors of Rome. We then head to the High Middle Ages, from around the 9th century to the end of the 13th, roughly. During that period, we see once again the resurgence of long-distance commerce. The population starts increasing considerably, and these now very well-established European kingdoms start developing their unique monetary standards. What you have on your screen now is a medieval penny from the city of Barcelona on modern-day Spain. That's the kind of coin you would have found in vast numbers on every high medieval marketplace. During this time period, we don't really see much evidence of Roman coins being used as money. Of course, people still found them. Roman coins often show up on medieval archaeological sites. A single coin was often put with the dead as they were buried, and might have been used locally as tokens when actual money was not available. But they don't seem to be an actual part of the monetary standard of the time. It's very reasonable to think most Roman silver or gold coins found at this time were simply traded for their precious metal content. But during this period, a very interesting phenomenon occurs. Here and there, on parts of Europe as far apart as Britain and Sicily, you will find echoes of Roman coin designs on medieval coins. Have a look at these coins from King Ethelred of Wessex. These coins are dated to the 10th century AD, and as you can see, they show the king in these very creative, different styles. From left to right, the first one seems to be holding a scepter, the second one at the center seems like a more plain portrait of the king, while the one on the right shows Ethelred ready for war, holding a spear, a shield, and wearing some sort of helmet. This seems like the fruit of some very creative die engraver who wanted to show his king in a variety of different poses. Now, if I put these coins side by side with coins from the 3rd century struck under Roman Emperor Probus, this can't be a coincidence. This engraver absolutely used the coinage of Probus or some later Roman emperor as an inspiration to his own coins. It's all there. The bust holding a scepter, the plain one, and even the more complicated one with all of the armor, shield, and spear on. These are copies. Not really copies, but adaptations of Roman coins. That's incredible. And then there are the really obvious examples. Let's look at this Augustales of Emperor Frederick II, struck at around 1230. As the name suggests, and I'll put both coins side by side, the Augustales is heavily inspired on an aureus of Emperor Augustus, struck over 12 centuries before this coin was made. You can see that the engraver did his personal interpretation of the design, instead of merely copying it, and we can find some typically medieval visual traits on this coin as well, such as the letters in a more Gothic style instead of using the classical font Roman coins used to have, a spectacular coin that clearly shows us that Roman coins during the Middle Ages might not have had a status as actual money, but they were definitely around. Institutions such as the Moneyers Guild that held the knowledge on how to make coins most certainly had Roman coins and used them as inspiration for their designs. We then get to the Renaissance, so we're talking roughly from the early 14th century to the end of the 16th century. This period marks a renewed interest on the classics. Roman and Greek art and philosophy start being studied more, and we have the first historically proven instances of coin collectors and some of the earliest numismatic studies. Petrarch, one of the fathers of Italian Renaissance, collected Roman coins. In one of his letters, he mentions, quote, Often there came to me in Rome a vine digger, holding in his hand old Roman coins, sometimes scratched by the hard edge of a hoe, urging me either to buy them or to identify the heroic faces inscribed on them. In 1354, Petrarch gave some Roman coins to Emperor Charles IV of the Holy Roman Empire, in hopes of convincing the Germanic emperor to move his capital to Rome. He records the encounter, quote, I presented him with some gold and silver coins, which I held very dear. They bore the effigies of some of our rulers, one of them a most lifelike head of Caesar Augustus, and were inscribed with exceedingly minute characters. During the Renaissance, many bishops, kings, and members of European nobility had their personal collection of ancient coins. This is why numismatics is often called the hobby of kings, although I'm absolutely sure many people from more humble backgrounds must have had their own little collections. They just weren't recorded like those of the nobility. Okay, let's pause for a bit. So far we've seen that actual ancient Roman coins must have circulated during the early Middle Ages, that Roman coinage had a long-lasting influence on European coinage up until the Renaissance, although not as real tender, and that they saw a quote-unquote afterlife in the collections of the aristocracy during the Renaissance and early modern periods. This might give us an answer to our initial question, right? Of how long did Roman coins circulate after the fall of Rome? Well, that would be the case if the modern period didn't surprise us with multiple instances of Roman coins still being used as money. Absolutely crazy. Let's look at some examples. What you have here on your screen is a 17th century Spanish coin. As you can see, it was a very crude little thing. These coins were made in vast numbers and they constantly suffered devaluations by the Spanish crown. Nasty business. The common people from Spain really suffered with inflation at that time. This example has been worn almost completely flat and it has this countermark. As we can see, the date is clearly visible, 1641, when the Spanish King Philip IV ordered these coins to be countermarked. On the reverse, we can see the other side of this countermark, a number 8 in Roman numerals. This was the denomination number, 8 maravedis is what this coin was called. Why do I show you this coin? Well, believe it or not, Roman bronze coins have been found with the same type of countermark. On your screen now are two examples, one of Emperor Gallienus and one of Emperor Constantine, so coins of the 3rd and 4th centuries AD. Notice they also have the same type of countermark, in this case a number 4. What does this tell us? It tells us that people were still finding Roman coins and putting them into circulation, at least as small change. The funniest thing about these two examples is that these countermarks were supposed to be put on coins at the main royal mints, so one would expect there would be a certain level of control. Well, apparently not. Someone found an old Roman coin forgotten by time, put it back into circulation, it circulated like any other coin, and even the mint workers didn't care about removing a supposedly invalid coin from circulation. They saw nothing but yet another small copper coin, hammered the countermark in it, and off it went to circulate again. And there are many, many more records of Roman coins being found and used as money in the modern period. In 1824, a Bavarian priest, in a book about Roman coins, said that in a large field near Notzheim, next to the old Danubian frontier where Romans and barbarians fought for centuries, was particularly rich in Roman coins, including silver and gold ones. The coins surfaced when one plowed the land and when it rained. By the mid-1700s, the local peasants had collected so many of them that they, quote, bought their beer at the tavern using Roman currency. A second example was used by Eugene Weber in his classic work Peasants into Frenchmen as an example of the autarky and isolation of French peasantry in the early 19th century. His account goes, I remember the period between 1834 and 1852, when the old coins that still had a little bit of silver were demonetized. The farmers of Isère found in the ground thousands of small, medium, and large Roman coins. They cleaned them and put them into circulation, where they were accepted as the denominations of the time: liards, 2 liards, sous, and double 10 centimes. The bakers, butchers, grocers, and merchants of the town had large quantities of them, and it was easy to collect them. The silver coins of the same period were sold for 50 centimes to 1 franc, according to their type, whether they were of Faustina, Caesar, or Hadrian. As for the other bronze objects, they were sold for scrap, while the gold coins were always sold and melted down by goldsmiths. With all of that remarkable evidence, I think we get an answer to our question. At least numismatically speaking, the Roman Empire never really left us. Its coins stood the test of time as actual money in the early Middle Ages, as inspiration for coin die engravers throughout the centuries, as lovely collectibles and tokens of royal grandeur for noblemen of the Renaissance, as tokens and small change for small rural communities all the way into the 19th century, and finally, as entertainment for you in the 21st century on a random YouTube video about coins. Who would have thought? That's why I collect ancient coins. It does connect us directly to those that came before us, even millennia ago. I hope you enjoyed this little voyage through time with me. If you did, consider leaving a like and subscribing. Happy collecting, and I'll see you soon.